So one thing I was thinking was about how building a solo practice or a group practice can be really tough. So I put together a couple things to just help you move from being overwhelmed to building a thriving, profitable practice that you absolutely love. So I started putting together a lot of these things, and we turned it into a whole course. So we're calling it the basics of practice. There's one for solopreneurs, solo practitioners, and then also another one for group practitioners. You can see all of the videos over at practiceofthepractice.com/basics. But just like some of the lessons that are in there is we talk about private practice mindsets. We talk about exactly how to have the exact steps for establishing a successful group or solo. We talk about specific ways of marketing, networking, hiring, those things that you absolutely need to have a practice. So I just put that together for you. It's over at practiceofthepractice.com/basics. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1396. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We want you to have both sides of that. We want you to thrive, to know all the things that you should be optimizing, but also to love it, to show up every day in your business and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is what I get to do. This is the impact I get to make. And to be using our brains in a way that we feel like it's headed in the direction we want. Which is why I'm so excited to talk about brain optimization today. This is an area that I've been fascinated by for years, talked about it in Thursday is the New Friday, and always love to kind of get up-to-date research and science on it. So that's why I'm so excited to have my friend Thoryn Stephens with me. Thoryn is a scientist, researcher, and entrepreneur with a background in molecular biology and a career spanning health technology and human performance optimization. He skis over 80 plus days per season, competes in triathlons nationally, and is developing a TED Talk on advancing human potential through AI, neuroscience, and brain-computer interfaces. Thoryn, welcome to the show.
Hi, Joe. Nice to meet you. Great to be here.
Yeah. Well, tell me about your interest in the brain. Was that always kind of your direction with molecular biology, or did that come up kind of throughout your career?
Yeah, so my focus has been in molecular and cell biology, at least initially. About the first third of my career was spent in the lab in biotechnology, doing small molecule drug research and drug development. And that's when I really started to get into neurobiology as a focus. I then went into data science, though, spent a number of years in industry, focused in on platforms for user measurement and optimization, and then full circle came back to my roots in science with Brain One.
What do we get wrong with the brain?
I think the concept of neuroplasticity, people, number one, brain and nervous system are not really taught. I think that, humans don't really think of the brain as a muscle that can
Hmm.
be exercised and can continue to regrow neurons, well into your later stages of life. And so, like any muscle, it should be exercised. So those are some of the protocols that we work on and distribute.
Yeah. So, like, what kind, when you say neuroplasticity, my understanding is that the brain isn't how we used to maybe think about it, of being kind of concrete and set, but that it can change over time.
Yeah.
What else would you kind of update from the things that maybe we learned in grad school, but we haven't learned about neuroplasticity in a long time?
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back, if you look at the gene expression model, you have DNA or genomics. Over here, you have proteomics. In between, you have the epigenome or epigenetics. So DNA, RNA, proteins, to really oversimplify it. Your genetic blueprint is essentially, set in stone. You do a genomics test generally once in your life. However, your gene expression is what varies. And a large portion of that, we as humans actually can control the gene expression through behaviors. And so I think that's just a kind of really inspiring piece in all of this is that while you still have a genetic predisposition, for let's say Alzheimer's, you can't necessarily cure that disease, but you can also help stabilize the impacts essentially of the disease, through changes, including microhabits and those types of optimizations. So small incremental things that you do, having really compounded interest.
Yeah. I think so often when I hear micro habits, when I hear optimization, productivity, all of that, it comes from a lot of the kind of like Instagram bro culture instead of
Mhm.
like something bigger or greater than just being some macho guy. How do you think through optimization and why we should care about this that's maybe in contrast to some of that or different from that?
Yeah, um, totally empathize with that viewpoint. I think of optimization, as something, again, like the concept of Kaizen or even just continual improvement, like so, we're given a certain set of skills, but we can continue to be better humans, better partners, better, fathers, men, whatever it might be. And, and so from that perspective, I'm always trying to personally get better. I mean, that's one of my, I think, just focuses in life, and I'm not doing it to compete against anyone else other than, myself, basically. So I think that's very, in some ways, inspiring.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like the peptide broification as an example. I come from the triathlon world, so we've been doing peptides for decades, red light for decades, cold plunging, and so we would consider those micro habits essentially. And then the small incremental things you do can add up to what's called a protocol or just your daily routine, and then you can build programs and things like that. So on that front, with peptides as an example, we've been doing recovery peptides, or some of them are for neurological optimization, again for quite a while, and now you're really seeing that more and more explode, essentially, as
Yeah.
these molecules become more readily available to humans.
What are some of those things that you would say for a while were on the fringe that now you're seeing really should be
Sure.
part of what most people, are
Yeah,
thinking about?
100%. I mean, like a couple immediate examples: cold plunging. So we've been doing cold plunging. I live here in Colorado. We do it in the river. I'll
Mhm.
probably go later today. It's quite cold as the snow melts. Roughly about 40. We're about 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, basically. So cold plunging, though, as a micro habit and part of your daily routine, your protocol. So those, that would be one. Another one is red light therapy. I remember once I was doing a triathlon training camp in California about 10 years ago, and my buddy Dean had the red light on his knee. We're
Mm.
like, Dean, what are you doing? And he's like, stimulating my mitochondria, and that was 10 years ago. And now it's on like Tony Robbins's, homepage. So those are a couple examples.
And
Let's say
around cold plunge, because I live in northern
sure.
Michigan, and there's these guys that cold plunge every Monday and Friday, and
Cool.
they're part of the like more on the like bro side, like it's a competition than like just like the health. Maybe they care about the health too, but it's like they're breaking up the ice to go in there. What is a good cold plunge? What is a like not helpful cold plunge?
Um, I mean, I think they're all generally good.
Okay,
You don't need to be therapeutically. I think after 3.5 minutes, it can start to actually degrade the beneficial impacts.
okay,
So at a certain points, it's too cold. But as as kind of a jump start of your autonomic nervous system, I think they're great. Some of my favorite cold plunges in the world have been in countries like Norway, where you're, in a hut on a lake and you sauna and then you go directly into the water. So you're also getting contrast therapy in that case. But those are absolutely incredible.
okay, okay.
And then the parameters I look at, I don't know how nerdy you want to get, but we look at the
Please do.
temperature of the water, duration in the water, frequency per week. Those would be the different pieces essentially in your protocol.
And I mean, how often should people be cold plunging for optimal benefits?
It varies, and it of course varies between genders, and there's a lot of kind of controversial, research on that. I personally go 3 days a week, and that generally, seems
Okay.
to really help with inflammation. I also will go after like long distance exercises. So if I'm doing a 100-mile bike ride, then I would certainly try to have the time to go cold plunging immediately after.
Yeah. What else? So you said the red light therapy, cold plunge. What are other things that have been on the fringe that now you think are just kind of standard for most people that want to live a healthier life and optimize their brain?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, again, GLPs as an example. GLPs being a peptide, a short chain amino acid. I mean, they're everywhere now. Those used to be super fringe, and now, everyone, I mean, it's such an explosion of humans that are now using them. So that would be an example. And then peptides more broadly, as we just mentioned. But yeah, those would be a couple. And we actually have a product called peptides.one that we're launching to help educate people, have a safe resource for humans to find them, because it's really the Wild West as well. and there's some bad actors.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I want to go back to just like habits. So you had mentioned kind of micro habits, then leading into a protocol, which leads into kind of long-term change. We have mostly therapists that listen here. What kind of things, when they're working with clients, do you think they should be addressing, say, in their intake? They got a new person coming in. What are
Sure.
some just questions that they should be asking that maybe isn't typical for therapists to ask, but you think from a health standpoint can really help them get to some of that brain research?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, we have clinical measures that we have in our system, Brain One, where, if it's a clinician or a therapist focusing on, general anxiety and depression, so GAD-7, you have PHQ-9 for PTSD. It really depends on, the indication. We also integrate into like brain mapping software like EEG. So one of our partners is called Wavi. So for clinicians looking to utilize brain mapping as an example, that's something that we really focus on as well. I think one of the biggest missing pieces is around the behavioral change and, things outside of just giving them a script, but what other small micro habits can they be doing to ultimately support, whatever they need support with? If it's brain, if it's just metabolic health, if it's sleep, obviously sleep, anxiety, microbiome, we hear from everyone. But focusing on the behavior side of that. So I think that's a really awesome opportunity.
Yeah. So I think that when I think about a lot of that industry, there are a lot of bad actors. You said earlier. I remember I went to this one conference and this guy was talking about like DNA tests, and it was like you spend $500, you get this DNA test, and then you're supposed to get all these things, and it basically was me paying $500 to get a test for him to say you need to be on all of these supplements that we sell. That then it's like great, I'm
Yeah,
going to drop $1,000 a month for these supplements. Like I thought you were going to say you need to eat more mushrooms
right.
or you need to eat more
Well,
celery. And so
exactly.
it's like I think then people like they don't even buy into any of it and they throw it all out when there are
Yeah.
really there's good science out there on certain things, and then there's also bad actors in other areas. And so I would love for you to push back and help me have a system upgrade for my brain on just like how much I've probably pushed out good healthy things that have just felt like scams to me.
Yeah, so I think you have to separate. So the way we look at the world, we develop programs around different levels of biological optimization. So usually let's say it's a 12-week program. So the first week we focus on like baseline recordings and really
Mm.
understanding where the human's at, also their goals, and we look at it through a multimodal, set of essentially outcome measures, right? So it could include genomics, yes. It could include epigenomics, so DNA methylation as an example. And then we also look at biometrics and then maybe additional biomarkers and so forth. So I think it really depends on where you're starting, first and foremost. I totally hear you. I don't know if I should name the vendor. Yeah, I will. It was Viome. So I did Viome recently. I've seen their advertisements, and there's multiple different types of data that they collect. And then to your point, I got it back and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. I open it up and it's like, don't eat oats and buy these supplements, basically. And so I go back to the prior point, the behavioral change, these small micro habits, like that's what humans are looking for. It's also the hardest, as I know your network will know. Getting a human to do one thing, it's that alone is hard, let alone following a total protocol. But it just depends on where they're at, their motivations, what they're trying to, really, trying to achieve at the end of the day. So we think about it, and kind of even to your prior question, the concept even of a protocol, just a health framework. It can just be a list of things that you do. That's another example of maybe something that we've pulled from triathlon or longer distance performance training, things like that, that people can follow to ultimately be successful. And so that idea of, again, and to your, as you said, like there's a lot of micro habits out there that could be very beneficial, but maybe aren't for you as a human. So
Mhm.
there's a number of other recommendations that we try to help with on that front. But.
Yeah. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using Therapy Notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support. It's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. It's interesting because I just, at the time of this recording, got back from a trip to Europe, and just seeing how the people, I was on Crete, which, has some of the people that live the longest in the world.
Right.
And they're walking a lot, they're eating fish, they're
Sure.
in community with each other. I mean, how much of our maybe point of view of having to, and I don't intentionally want to push back on what you're saying. It's more just like kind of thinking through it as I'm feeling what's coming up for me is like, how much of our like push towards micro habits and supplements and those sorts of things is being out of alignment with how healthy humans have lived, before now. I guess maybe the real question behind it might be like, how much of this ends up being a reflection on just a bad culture where our culture has created really unhealthy living, and
Mm.
we need to get back to just a lot of more simple types of living.
Yeah.
One thing I'm thinking about is just how, like, as we were in Crete, like all of the menu was things that they could get on Crete for the most part, or from just like the mainland. They aren't shipping a lot of
Yeah.
things from across Europe. They're eating food that they can grow, and they aren't eating food that they can't. Now that's not universally true. They import a lot of chocolate and things like that.
Sure.
But I'm just wondering, like, is some of what we're having to do for our own health just being out of alignment with what nature has kind of we've done for thousands of years?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Or is it just becoming, back more aligned with those principles because we've lost
Mm,
them?
yeah.
So, the Mediterranean diet, as an example, from a nutritional standpoint, is pretty well validated, scientifically. Also, just eating locally, like, of course, I mean, that makes sense, if it's from the region you're eating in. And, there's obviously impacts there, relative to, carbon emissions and all those pieces. So, but that's actually, in part of our research, what we really do think about. And you look at these ancient cultures and societies, and what microhabits did they have? What are the similarities between, ancient China and Japan, or, so forth? So that's actually been really interesting. But I think part of it is just like, in some cases, just coming back to the roots, spending time in nature, like that's a microhabit that I'm a
Mm,
massive proponent of. I'm labeling it a microhabit, I'm labeling it a routine. It's again just, or a protocol. It's really just the things that you do every day, and you can have them written down. You can use our app to help track it or not. There's just value in like literally writing the list, what brings you joy. Another interesting area of this research, as we looked at these longevity protocols, green zones around the world, what is it about their habits? And it's pretty fundamental. It comes back to like 5 or 6 key pillars: nutrition, one; exercise, some level of stress, anxiety, sleep. It's like the top of the list. I mean, again, you can't be neurologically active if you're or optimized if you're not getting the right amount of quality sleep. And humans generally don't, we until recently haven't really thought about that as, again, a micro habit. And it's even more than a micro habit because there's such a collection of things that you can do to help optimize your sleep. Um, so, nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, community. Side note, I mean, that's actually a very important micro habit that people, it's in the research. There's a study called Lancet 2020 Dementia Prevention. It's one of the ones that they've outlined to prevent dementia is community, because people who have that connection to themselves, to a group, I also think to spirit, whatever that looks like, they're generally, they tend to also live longer as well, so
mm,
that would be another type of a micro habit that we'd recommend.
yeah. Now I want to switch into some of the mindset stuff. I know we covered a lot of the kind of practical tools, but When founders and people that own their practices, when they're feeling overwhelmed by competing priorities, when you look at the brain and the top performers you work with, like what are they doing different than people that are just overwhelmed by everything happening in their business?
I mean, again, I come back to those core pillars like sleep. Start with sleep, whatever you need to do to optimize your sleep, And so I think they're covering the basics first and foremost. And then you can get into some of the more advanced, training, EEG, brain mapping, plus neurofeedback, things of that nature. And it's not easy, but at least focusing on sleep. I think another dimension is data, but wearables as an example.
Mm.
You have such a proliferation of data, you can use the data to help, again, optimize things, sleep, nutrition, exercise, all those pieces. Without being enslaved to the technology, again, it can just be guardrails. Or you can do it every day and track it every day. We see, different types of humans that do, these different ways of following these types of, protocols and programs.
Yeah. When you talk wearables or you talk data, like what are the things that if you just did these, I know that there's lots of things we could cover, but like if you just did these three things, for example, you'd
Mm-hmm.
be 80% of the way there. You'd be 50%, whatever the percent is.
Sure.
Like what are just a couple of those things that it's like, if
Yeah.
you just did this, you'd be light years ahead.
One, this is a little counterintuitive, but the concept or the micro habit of, single tasking, so not multitasking. We come from a hustle, culture, society. We always got to be on the grind, but not really. And so when you're on your laptop with the phone, if you have a TV, and you're doing three things or four things simultaneously, you're going to be less neurologically efficient than if you're focusing on one, 15 minutes, and then focusing on the second, and so forth. So yeah, the concept again of unitasking, single tasking versus multitasking, that would be one really, really critical. Again, I come back to the basics. So sleep, but then within sleep, there's a whole set of parameters. So things like the temperature of the room, it could be the temperature of the mattress. It could be white noise, how long before you go to bed relative to screens, all those types of things. Circadian regulation. I mean, that's actually probably, I'd say top of the list. When you get up in the morning, how long till you can get direct sunlight on your face to help support your circadian regulation, cortisol release. And then literally that morning routine, micro habit, is what sets the stage for your evening, ultimately. So, yeah, I think those would be a few that are almost non-negotiable. Other ones
Yeah.
that I do personally, things like always take the stairs. I don't have it in my protocol, but it's like just I'm one of those humans. No matter what, unless I'm injured or just cannot, I'll always take the stairs. Doesn't matter. But those types of things, always trying to get as much activity as you can within reason.
No, I love that. Yeah. So good sleep, moving your body, like planning out your day a little bit. Um, I'm wondering, so imagine a therapist is working with someone and they just keep running into a wall. And it's almost like the therapist cares more about their brain optimization, their life optimization more than they do. What do you suggest a therapist does at that point?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. Again, I would go back to lifestyle. Are there things, small incremental changes that this human can do to try to help support whatever that is that they're trying to achieve, um, as opposed to just taking a pill, or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, lifestyle for me, and as we broke down the prior categories, exercise, what does that look like? Sleep, stress, all those pieces. Um, we hear microbiome, dysregulation. I mean, that comes up on a daily basis. Nearly everyone I know is having issues with the microbiome. So, maybe different sets of protocols or micro habits specific to, whatever they're trying to achieve. But yeah, no, that's a really tough one.
Hmm. I'm wondering if there's an area that you struggled with for a while that you feel like you either overcame or made some progress that you'd be willing to share.
Personally, professionally,
I mean, I
um,
think in regards to just like your own health, your own wellness, your own brain health, like whichever area you wanna tap into.
yeah, I mean, I have an anecdote maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I broke my clavicle. I live here in Colorado. I was snowboarding aggressively, landed wrong, hit, And I went to the number one orthopedic in the United States. They're called the Stedman Institute, and they x-rayed it. She's like, it's completely broken, and threw me a sling. And that was actually when I first began thinking about my company, Brain One. And I was like, this is it. This is my recovery protocol. It was a mobilization, and there was nothing else. She's like, yep, see you in 6 weeks. And so I went back to my network, and I pulled together a protocol for clavicle repair, bone repair, collagen, bone broth, big bison stews is what was recommended by our team. We have a lot of nutritionists, dietitian. And then I also did some localized PEMF, PEMF. Are you familiar with that, Joe?
I'm not.
It's pulse electrical magnetic frequency. It's just like it stimulates bone regrowth. Again, you asked earlier, like it's a little bit over here. It's not totally, but there's more and more data coming around, these newer types of, not even new, these types of, methodologies. So this one's called PEMF. They also have PEMF mats. You can do grounding. It's really interesting, but I did some PEMF, focused on my nutrition. I went back in 4 weeks and not 6. And the doctor's like, oh my gosh, the bone's completely healed. We've never seen it heal so quick. What did you do? And I was like, doctor, I focused on my nutrition. And they looked at me and they're like, we never would have thought of that. And so that was like one of those pivotal moments where I guess it just reinforced, the importance of, not just health, but nutrition specifically, and these types of habits and, the things that we do. Like we're in an amalgamation of, these small little, decisions that we make every day. And again, even going back to that whole gene expression model in the beginning, we have the opportunity to change our gene expression, to a certain degree. We actually have some of that control. And I think that's actually, very inspiring. So, we're not completely just locked in, but we actually can make positive changes in our lives.
So good. Thoryn, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Again, the importance of behavior, behavior change, and how that can really, really impact a human. Lancet 2024, that dementia prevention article is an example. It outlines 14 behavioral changes people could follow to help support them prevent dementia. And it's entirely based on behavior. And many of them, we should be giving these protocols to our grandparents and our grandparents, but it comes down to those small incremental changes that really have that lasting, significant impact on our lives.
So good. If people want to work with you, if they want to learn more about what you're doing, where should we send them?
So Brain.one, they can jump on the waiting list, and we'd love to push them to the front. We'll be going live later this summer. We also have Peptides.one if you're interested in peptides and that level of peak performance optimization. Happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
I love conversations like this because I think sometimes as therapists, we don't tap into all these other things that are happening, triathletes, all these other folks, and thinking through our general health. And, as I dig in more to other arenas, folks are always kind of looking at similar types of things. The amount of times I talked about health and sleep, before I sold my practice, to, some angry teenager comes and their parents say, what should we do? And we start with, well, what are they eating? How are they sleeping? How much screen time are they having? And then magically we reduce their screen time. We have them, eat a little bit less sugar, have them go to bed at a little more reasonable time based on kind of the temperature of their body. They are going to bed usually later, but then can we advocate with the school for them to not go in, first thing in the morning? All these things, then magically their behavior gets better. So I love what Thoryn's talking about here. I love seeing the overlap and the different discoveries that happen. This is what we're all about here on the show. So, if you have things that you're interested in, we are live streaming all of these podcasts in addition to also releasing them through the, normal iTunes, Spotify, all of that. We would love for you to join in that conversation online, mostly LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. That's mostly where we hang out, and would love to see you there. Also, if you want to be in community, we have the Practice Academy. That's over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership. You can go over there, read all about what we're doing in community. We have hundreds of therapists there learning and growing together. Also, we could not do this show without our sponsor support. Therapy Notes is the best electronic health records out there. They've been a supporter for years, but even more importantly, they can help you grow and scale your business with their EHR. They have embedded in their system their own virtual way, similar to Zoom, of doing HIPAA-compliant teletherapy. They'll help you move from your current billing platform over to Therapy Notes. They have amazing customer service. A lot of these EHRs only have text support or chat, but you can actually talk to a real person that will help you out if you get stuck. A couple years ago, I remember I had a client that had switched over, and the old company wasn't releasing the things, and Therapy Notes did such an amazing job of coordinating so that therapist could get back to doing therapy instead of worrying about her EHR. They're an amazing company. Head on over to therapynotes.com. Use promo code JOE, J-O-E, at checkout to get a couple months for free. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.